Hello, my name is No Hyo-jin, an elder who's serving the Yeowon Church. And in society, I am a skin specialist, and this is somewhat of a burdensome position, and I have to shoot this video, and I keep thinking about, should someone like me be making this type of video? But my pastor has told me this is a voice that needs to be heard, and with faith, I will begin. First, let us sing a hymn, 429, and although it's a video, just first verse, let us sing this hymn and begin.
세상 모든 풍파 너를 흔들어 약한 마음 낙심하게 될 때에 내려주신 주의 복을 세어라 주의 크신 복을 내가 알리라 받은 복을 세어보라 크신 복을 내가 알리라 받은 복을 세어보라 주의 크신 복을 내가 알리라. 사실 제가 마음이
To be frank, when my heart is a bit shaking or I'm kind of confused in my mind, I sing this hymn often. When I sing this hymn, God, no matter how difficult or complex the situation might seem, God has led me till now. He had allowed me to come to this place. God's guidance and God's Immanuel blessing of being with me is so great. And all the blessings that I've seen till now has been so great. It is inexplicable, and so I truly enjoy this praise. And when we say blessings, material things of the world, people say that we still need these physical things. We still need to receive these blessings. And so the priority of life is very important. And the theme of today's lecture is the priority of life. 3 John 1:3. You all know it very well. I'll read it for you. Beloved, as your soul gets along well, may everything else get along as well. For me, I think I was always this way. I always asked God to bless me. I said, if you bless me, I will do great works for you. So God, please bless me first. That's the heart that I had. But God's method was not that. God says to seek first the kingdom of God, His righteousness. And at first, I really didn't feel that. And so I had a children's book on Joseph that my mom had bought for me when I was young. And because of that, I wanted to go to church from a young age. And so, long ago, I went to a church for the first time. And I still remember the first time I went to church. It was an old brick church building. I entered its wooden doors, and I began my life of faith. And I was a good student when I was young, and I always thought I must study hard, and I had the heart to before God. God, I will do my best, I will be successful, and starting from then, I will do my work for you. So it's very rational. It's a good decision, and as I continue to try to do that, I put church and worship on break, and I wanted to focus to do a good job. I worked very hard. I tried to do much better, but afterward, I began to get sick, and I had severe back pains. So my left leg and all throughout my back, I had a lot of pains. And because of that, I've tried every type of healing throughout the country, and it was so bad I couldn't even go to school during high school. And it was to the point where my high school teacher was very saddened because I was such a good student. But as I was going in and out of the hospital with all these treatments, I felt that I can't, stop my studies this way. I'm going to try no matter what. And so I tried studying laying down on my back, even as a patient in the hospital. I tried my best, and I got into medical school. So I was born in Seoul, but I went to medical school in Busan, and I went to the Koshin Medical School. And when I went, my psychological state was very anxious. I didn't want to come so far for my studies. And it was a new place that I've never been before, and there were so many complicated issues. And so if you enter into medical school, you have to keep taking tests. And so if your subject gets low in any test, then they kick you out of school and send you home. So the medical school is very high, tense, pressure situation. And so during medical school, I had this younger sibling who was very good at their studies. And they were so very good, the way they organized their notes, to the point where, they gave out their notes for others to see. They studied very well. And they're the youngest female student in medical school, and everybody liked her. And one day, I went to the library, and I saw that she was reading a book that you must break the curses that are flowing through your family line to live. And so in passing, I saw that book title, and it really just imprinted in my mind. So I asked her, what is the book about? It's kind of a strange book. And she laughed, and she called me and began to tell me. And when I heard her, maybe an hour and a half, she talked about many things. And so later, I realized she didn't speak of the book. She spoke of the way of salvation to me. And that message, when I heard from her, what I felt was the state of the unbeliever was really describing myself. My heart was really just beating out of my chest. I asked her, what church do you go to? And she said, I go to a certain church. It was Saturday that day, and I asked, can I go with you to church? And the first church I went to was the Busan Immanuel Church, previously Dongsan Jail Church. And so I didn't even know what this place was, and I just followed her. And it was really around this time, during the fall, almost right before Thanksgiving, when you're doing communion. And so the theme of the message was restoration for that day of communion. Reverend Yu spoke of restoration. And, tears are not necessarily important, but I began to cry so much, and I was somewhat embarrassed because I was crying before all these people I didn't even know. And I was thinking about my past and really received a great amount of grace and organized a lot of emotions. And I began to restore my life of faith in Busan at the time. And already that was 1998. This is 25 years ago. Already, all this time has passed. Unbelievable, really. And that year, I received the first level camp training. And everybody knows when they go to first level camp training, the first day you go is kind of, you don't know anybody and it's kind of nerve-wracking. But there was somebody who I knew, and this friend that I knew, he had kind of a handicap in his eye, and his focus was not right. He can't really look you in the face. He kind of had a lazy eye. I thought, maybe that's the only person I should avoid. But during the first level camp training, I really didn't have time to focus on the message like that time. I received so much grace. Each and every word of the first level camp training message, I really didn't want to lose a single word. I was writing down every word. And toward the end, you go to the field, and they make teams to go out. And so they attached me with the guy with the lazy eye and made us into an evangelism team, and we went out. And so he kind of was talking about himself. And in Gyeongnam, he's kind of a son of the most famous shaman in the area. And he was seeing visions and hallucinations from junior high, and he could not even sleep. And he was trying to stop doing that, but he started to do drugs like glue, and he came to a very terrible state. And so he came to a point where he became suicidal. He didn't have any hope for himself. And it's very ironic, he felt, that when his own mother was such a famous shaman, but his own life was something that he could not solve, his mother could not solve. But one day he saw this gospel letter message, and he saw the state of the unbeliever. He felt that it was really talking about himself. And he asked, where's this message from? Where's this church? And he came to the first level camp training. So when I listened to his testimony, we shared such a deep, sympathetic forum, and I wanted to avoid him at first, but later I realized this is somebody that God has prepared for us to really relate these conflicts and problems that we had faced in the past, the state of the unbeliever, and only Christ can be the Savior of that. And so we received such a great grace and answers and a boldness during the first level camp training. And so there's the back road of Dongsamji Church. And we looked up the sky, and there was a very bright sunlight coming through the clouds. And I just felt such an overwhelming sense of thankfulness and grace. And so truly, I felt like I was walking on a bed of flowers. And so if you enter into the main, the situation where there's so much tests and hardships that I had to endure, and I tried my best. But the church and school and the library, really I only went back and forth of those places. There were so many tests, especially on Monday in middle school. And through Sunday worship, if you don't receive grace, then you can't really handle all of the schedule. And so, living the life of faith, I was able to go through those difficult times. But sadly, during the most important time, my mother was a pharmacist. My father is a government official. And when he retired, my mother was running a pharmacy, but it ran into bankruptcy. And it was so sad because I wasn't receiving any money for living, and for medical school, you need to pay a lot of fees for books, and I had to study these medical books, but they're so expensive and I couldn't pay for it. And so sometimes I would borrow from my friends, but you can't borrow all the time. And so I faced a difficult time. And in my heart, I thought, it's okay. And I'll just do my best with what I got. I could endure this situation. And afterward, a short time after, my father went to the hospital because he was coughing so much. And so they did a deep assessment diagnosis. And he seemed to have a pneumonia. And so they wanted to do further testing. That was a day that he came out of the hospital. After doing his test, they felt like he was getting better. And so when they got the results back, they saw that he had terminal lung cancer. And so the entire family was so shocked. And my father had never been sick before, but after this diagnosis, 6 months after he passed away, my father was a very strong person. And at the time, I really thought about what can I do for my father? And already in that state, he was so much in a terminal state that there was nothing I could really do for him. So I attached a minister, and he accepted the gospel through him, and I relayed Reverend Yu's messages. And my father, he really was far apart from the church for so long, so critical of the church, but when he passed away while listening to Reverend Yu's tape in his ear. And so he was a very large man, but when he passed, he was only skin and bones. And so I was so thankful that I was able to see my father receive salvation before he passed. And that was, God's plan. But soon after, my mother got a breast cancer diagnosis. And so she had to sell the pharmacy, and I did that contract by myself. And all of these situations occurred all of a sudden. And so in my heart, even without myself realizing, until now we have been following this word and restoring and coming to this point. But I started to question, does not everything get resolved by the gospel? And at that time, I really wanted to sincerely ask this question to somebody. If you have the gospel, even in this difficult situation, can you really overcome all of these things? And I really did not have any bravery to be able to so boldly ask that question. And I didn't really want to speak of my private family matters. I couldn't tell anybody this hardship I was going through. And later, as time passed, what I felt was that even disbelief, you could do well as you could believe well. And so I didn't leave the flow of the word, but this disbelief that I had in the corner of my heart, that maybe that everything wasn't resolved through the gospel. And so the world and the church, this kind of being on the fence. Sometimes I would go completely into the church, then I would fall completely into the world. And so it was like I was on a tightrope on top of this water, and I was just trying to keep balance. And so there are so many resolutions that I made at the time. And as I look back, it was resolutions that I made because I had no assurance. And even now, when I make decisions before other people or when remnants ask me questions, should I do this or not? Then I tell them this. If you are asking whether you should do it or not, then don't do it. If you're concerned about whether to do it or not, then you haven't received that answer in the Word. And so in that state, don't make that decision. I tell them that. But at that time, that was my situation for me. I had no assurance whether I should do it or not. I was conflicted. In many of these situations occurred in a short span of time. And so I graduated from medical school and I became a dermatologist, a specialist in skin. And it wasn't something that you could choose, but my position was so that I could go into dermatology, and almost to the point where that was my only choice. But on the outside, I was pretty much kicked out of my position. And the place where I ended up, by somebody's introduction, I began to work at a mental hospital. And so, almost like happenstance, I did have the heart of wanting to experience that kind of field. And so there was 1,000 mental patients in this mental hospital. And there were 5 specialist doctors and about 5 doctors like me who were not specialists, pretty much interns. And so 10 doctors in all. And I began to work in that mental hospital. And I met someone when I went to see what kind of hospital it was. This person was explaining to me what the hospital was about. And the system is so-so, and I thought, this person maybe stayed at this hospital working for a long period of time. Later, I realized it's somebody that came a week before I did. And as I was talking to that person, I really communicated with them. I really felt that I got along well. So I had to prepare my residency for a year. And there was somebody I really related with. I thought maybe I should study here and really do my residency here for a year. And so I was there for 1 year, and I did my studies, and really I was able to see the state of the unbeliever, the very, very ultimate end of the state of the unbeliever. And so there are drug addictions, there are people who create accidents. And so if they're in a limited, controlled environment, they all look like lambs. They all seem so innocent. But the moment they step out of the hospital, they return to their past states. And so that if they enter into the hospital, they seem fine. When they go out to the world, they continue to go back their own way. So this vicious cycle, I was able to see myself. And so this type of system, this hospital, is absolutely necessary. You need this controlled environment, but it cannot cure the person. I was able to see that. And so I finished my residency at the mental hospital, and I got a residency at a dermatology hospital. And afterward, I was called to be assistant professor at another medical university. So I didn't even think about it, but the head professor at the Severance University said, "This is the disciple I want to raise. And so please accept him into our program to make professors." And so this is very once in a million chance. It really never happens this way. And the Shincheon Severance dermatologist, it has 100-year history. It's 110 years now, because I went 10 years ago. And so it had a 100-year history. And so it was the first time in 50 years that an outside doctor had come in to join their program. And so I taught the intro students as well as doing some residency at the hospital. And while I was there, I faced pretty much the extremes of my life. And so I got my dermatology accreditation, and it seemed like I was going up, successful in life. But in my heart, it was very difficult. This life decisions was not made by the guidance of the Word, but I was really trying to make those decisions for myself while looking at the world. And so those continued to pile upon each other, and then one day exploded, and I completely crumbled. But these difficulties continue to come personally, but I had to continue to do my work. And so one day I got really drunk, and I was crying out to God in prayer. God, am I a child of God? I received so much grace. I lived my life of faith. I came to this point. But why am I in this state? I had that kind of heart. I continued to pray to God. Am I somebody who's truly saved? And in my heart, there was no change of that, the fact that I was a child of God. And I thought, then what's wrong with me? My family became bankrupt. I wasn't able to absolve all those situations, and it all just came crashing down on me. I have so many personal problems. I seem to live a life of faith, but what am I doing? Where am I going? I really had that kind of feeling. And then I fell asleep, and in my dream, and in my heart, I felt like I was in a process of walking on this journey. And at the very end, there was this very big executive chair, and it was turned around. And somebody seems to be sitting on that executive chair. And so I walked toward the chair, and I turned the chair around. And on the chair, who was sitting there? It was me. I was sitting on that executive chair. And I was already an adult, but it was a baby self that was sitting there, the baby No Hyojin that was sitting there. And I woke up at that moment, and in my heart, the thought that came to me was something like this. You were the master of your life up till now. And at that moment, I felt that it was a grace that God gave me. And so what I'm saying is I received salvation, yes, but I was the master, and Jesus was at my feet. As we see the gospel letter, that picture. And I saw that was me. And that's the message that I received at the time. And so ultimately, you make your own decisions, you do whatever you want, and you don't make decisions according to the Word, you just live the way you wanted. And so at that time, this was a very big answer and conversion, turning point. And so starting now, really, I will make Jesus first. Really ask God for everything and go the direction that God desires. I must live my life that way. It was my personal turning point. And so at the Shincheon Severance Hospital, I was working there, and I saw a teacher, and he was a top graduate of the Yonsei Medical School. It's even difficult to get into that school. But he was a top specialist of his field, and he was chosen to be a professor at the Severance Hospital. And so I did a lot of cooperation with this top talent, and he was having such a hard time. And on the outside, when he works with others, he's, trying to be as bright and personable, but he was having such a hard time. And so as I saw it,
안날 것 같은 사람들도 이 사람 데려가서 또 막 일해라고 하고
people who weren't really going to help him ultimately, but they were asking for help. And so he was getting exhausted because he was trying to do this work for everybody. He couldn't say no, and he was about to get burnt out. And I saw that. And so in passing, I didn't really say much, but in passing, I told him, teacher, you need a different power. You can't keep doing this. Ultimately, you're not going to be able to overcome all of these hardships. People have a different strength. That's something you need to find. And when I said that, most people will say, in this situation, they'll say, really, it's not the case. And so, oh, thank you. They would have just passed on by. But this person asked, what is that different power? And I thought, oh, wow, he's really interested. And so I said a little more. I spoke about why we must meet God. And I spoke to him little by little, but he kept showing a great response. And I relayed the word to him. And truly, he was somebody that really responded to the word. And so we were able to share forum more and more. And one day I asked, would you like to come with me to church? And he said, yes. And so I was working at the Shichon Severance, and the closest church was the Yeowon Church. And that was where this teacher wanted to go with me. And so when we went to Yeowon Church for the first time, through Reverend Ju, I received the secret of this gospel and so much grace. But through Pastor Jung at Yeowon Church, the feeling that I had when I heard that message, that first feeling was that I was a Tarakbang Pharisee. I kind of came to that realization. That was my time schedule. And so the word was full in my head, but in my heart, it really wasn't simmering down. And so Pastor Jung really attacked me with these messages. It really stuck into me. I thought, oh man, this is me. And at the Yeowon Church, I received so much grace. And this new person that I brought with me, he received even more grace. He came to church for the first time. And when I saw him, I thought, this is how a new believer receives grace. And he received such a great grace. And so at the time, what I talked about is, I don't have to say I'm somebody, or I don't have to introduce him as somebody, but the most important thing here is to put roots down in the Word. So in the worship, we'll focus and we'll just receive grace. So I told him that. And really, I was amazed to the extent he received grace. And we were living this life of faith at the Yeowon Church in this way. And we came to this time schedule of the temple construction. And at the time, the Yeowon Church had built the Remnant Culture Center, and they had about $30 million in debt. And the elders held on to the covenant of the 300 of Gideon, and they want to reconstruct the main sanctuary. And so they held to this covenant. They began to do the temple construction. And when that message was proclaimed, in my heart, I thought, from when I was young, 25 years ago, this message that I heard from Reverend Yu, the most important flow, I thought were two things. First of which is the temple. Second is remnant. And so in my heart, that was the covenants I was holding. And when I look at Yeowon Church, that was the time schedule for Yeowon Church. And I thought, I need to make a resolution for this. And so I had the heart to do that. And so I was going to talk about this to the new believer. But he says he's already made the resolution by himself. And what he said was, I will raise, today's words, raise a partisan. I will be that one fighter for Gideon 300. And so I was so shocked by that, because what I was thinking about giving offering was not near his offering. And so this is a new believer believing for the first time. And I thought, wow, he's different. And so the first becomes last, last becomes first. To that extent, he received so much grace, and he made a resolution to give a full offering to do the Gideon offering. And in that year, at the end of the year, our head pastor, Jung Eun-ju, he was preparing for the New Year's message, and he gave us this message. He gave the example, the cross. And so, really, when they had horse racing, the white horse usually won, but one day the dark horse won. And starting from that moment, people began to use the dark horse term. And so we have young adults who are like the dark horse. Nobody knows who this young adult is. Nobody knows when he started coming to the church, but he gave a Gideon offering. And this offering became the seed to really light the fire, to really passionately give offering for this temple construction. And that was that new believer. And so really, like anointing fire, everyone was really just moved and challenged, and we were able to complete the temple construction as you see today, and we were even able to dedicate the building. And in between that time, and for myself, I made the resolution. I gave the Gideon offering, and I got married. And while getting married, I thought in my heart, what is it that God desires most? That this work, this temple construction. And so, as soon as we got married, we had our first child. And in the name of the child, what God desires most, in Korean, it's Ha-won. And so we gave another Gideon offering in my child's name. And, of course, there are situations that occur during long construction processes. And there was another time of resolution that we had to make in this process of construction. And so what happened was, we were part of the business industry missions for the Yeowon Church. And in the message, our head pastor, for temple construction, he said, let's really resolve to give a tithe of our entire net worth. And I was praying about that. And so right now I'm running a hospital in Yeouido, and I also had a hospital in the Sangam region. And it was a new construction, and I really prayed at the time. And God, I just opened a new building here at Sangam, and I really don't have any worth. And so, there were typewriters, and so I thought about net worth equals, like your liquid money, assets, and also your owning of land and buildings. And so every time I prayed, I kind of saw that my net worth isn't just how much money I have, but is all the assets that I hold. And so with the money based on all of my assets, and so I thought this is God's given mission. And so this God's mission in Korean is Ha-myung. And so this is before we had a second child, and we gave that offering. But the amazing thing is, our head pastor received that offering, and so we didn't know we were going to have another child, and we just gave the offering as Ha-myung. We didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl, but the head pastor prayed for us. And really, we didn't even pray for a child. And just before our second child, we just prayed for that, but ultimately we got a second son named Hamyang. And so afterward, the third time, my wife, who was also a new believer, one day, she had this door open at the Shincheon Severance again, and so they asked her to come to be an assistant pastor. And so my wife heard that, and she was so overjoyed. And the moment she heard that, all of a sudden, she had this kind of anxiety that came to her. And so the difficulties that she felt in the past, before she had the gospel, all the burdens that she had, so that returned. So all of a sudden, when she received that request to come back to the Severance University, she was hit with this panic attack. And so I was kind of concerned because it wasn't something that would pass. And her panic attacks got so bad that she couldn't really function. And so I became concerned. And so we spoke that there is only one way to overcome this situation, through the worship, through the grace, through message. So focus on worship. Let us really organize the message. And they said they couldn't hear the message. It wasn't receiving grace from the message. And so their face was really, they had lost all laughter. They had lost all smiles. And so in my family, as I heard this, I was really praying for this. Really, a time of worship, a time of grace is where she needs to be. My wife asked me, when am I going to get better? You think I'm going to get better at all? Isn't something bad going to happen to me? She felt to that extent. And so I've been at the mental hospital. I told her, there is no other way. Only the Word is the way. Only the Word of Christ can move you to make you better. I held to this Word. That is how I was able to survive till now. Even if I didn't have the Word, I wouldn't be here. So hold on to only Christ. Hold on to only the grace of the worship. I continue to tell that. And so months went by, 7-8 months went by, and there was no change. And so that time schedule, really for my family, we were having nothing to do except pray. We couldn't do anything else except pray. And so our head pastor gave the message of the Waymaker. And so the most popular gospel song that year, the message of Isaiah. And so there will be a way made in the wilderness, rivers in the desert. And so this new start that I will give you, be expectant of that. And so the message, my wife received it, and almost like complete resolution took place for her, that she was able to hold to hope again, that God will give me a new grace. And so receiving that New Year's message, and so she began to smile again. And I was able to have hope again. And so the Waymaker, all day long, we listened to that song all month long. And so she was able to break free from this anxiety and darkness through holding to that message. And so we were so thankful for this. Completely, we were resolved with this serious problem, because I came to the point where I thought she was really going off the deep end. But she received so much grace. She would praise in the morning and exercise and write down her prayer journal, and I was so moved by that myself. So we resolved to give another offering. And our third was glory to God, so Ha Young in Korean. And so we gave this third offering. And so we didn't have a third child at the time. Well, we didn't pray for a child, but that was the covenant we held to. But once again, as we gave that offering, God gave us a third child, a daughter, and so we named her Ha Young, just as the covenant we held to. And so Ha Young, the day she was born on her mom's birthday. And so I thought, when I saw that, it's almost like God's wit, that complete dire situation where I thought my wife was even about to die, but seeing this new life coming through Ha-young, and I thought, God's saving grace of life giving to my wife and my child. I was able to confirm that once again. And so my life's testimony of faith is in all my children's names. And so with what God desires, God's mission, and God's glory. And so with that prayer topic, I continue to live my life. And then about 10 years, so 10 years ago, when I was an intern at the mental hospital, this really close friend I was able to meet 10 years later. And I was so glad to see him. And it was really a fateful meeting. And so we met several times and we shared meals together. We talked about how we've been. And this friend told me he used to have this scissor lock sleeping problems. And he said these days he felt like he was being possessed. And in that moment, I thought, I shouldn't just let him be like this. And so I shared the gospel. And so I shared the way of salvation, the state of the unbeliever. And he showed a response. And before 10 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago, when I saw him before, he probably would have blown me off. But now he was sleeping about telling me about his sleep disorder, and so he started listening to the gospel. And so maybe we would meet maybe twice a month at the hospital. We did darakbang because we were so busy. And at the time we had Pastor Beck, and I requested him. He's such a close friend of mine, and I really want you to share the message with him. And so the pastor met with him, did darakbang with him. And it may be to the third and fourth meeting. And so there's the acceptance after the first meeting, but he was going to think about it. And then the acceptance comes the third, fourth meetings, and then he accepted Jesus Christ. And he started coming to Yeowon Church and began to live his life of faith, and he's still doing well now. And before, he was somebody who was really deep into philosophy and Buddhism, but now he surely accepted Jesus Christ. And so at the hospital, when I meet with patients, in certain times, my hospital has become my platform. So I have no need to go out to evangelize. Patients come to my hospital, and a lot of people come to receive healing, maybe their skin or face, and there are these breaks, the 10-minute breaks, and there are people who kind of really ask me, and we're just having conversation, but some people are really responsive to the gospel and spiritual things. And so there was somebody who was very sensitive one time, and they came to receive diagnosis. She brought her daughter to receive treatment. And I was talking with her daughter, and she really responded to the word. And so the daughter started coming to church, and the daughter's prayer topic, maybe it won't work, but she wanted her mother to believe in Jesus as well. And so let's pray together, I said. And even that person was a representative of a big company, and I didn't think that she would come to church either. She was kind of that kind of person, but God's works is different. And so now, every time I see her, I really see that God is alive. The seed of the word, wherever it's planted, God really allows it to grow. And I completely saw her transform, and she's coming to our church so well. And so next to our church, we have our head pastor. He's a very healthy figure. And so I enjoyed exercise before, but I decided to focus on physical training. And I had a physical trainer who was assigned to me. And after I started physical training, the next day somebody came with a scar, and it was my physical trainer. And I said, wow, because I wanted to receive good physical training as well. And so I treated him as best I could. And this physical trainer continued to kind of speak about his more personal things. And I thought, so I spoke of some spiritual things, and he really showed a response. And as you know, if you share the gospel to somebody, if you share the word, it's not trying to convince them. We just proclaim the word. And so I just proclaim Christ, and there are people who respond, and so you save them. And we're so busy just saving those who show response. And so the physical trainer, the word I proclaimed, he's so desperate to hear the next word. He was so thirsty for the word. And so that physical training was utilized as our darakbang time, and I concentrated on proclaiming the word to him, and really God prepared him in this way. And I saw him really just absorbing the word and following. And now, just a couple days ago, he said in the young adult group, he truly wants to devote himself for the church. He says, maybe there's time scale for me to be ordained now, to be a church officer. It's only been a year since he came to church, and I saw his spiritual growth so much. The disciple in the field is prepared. Evangelism isn't something that we do, but really just discovering the prepared people that God has put in place. And so for me, truly, if I hadn't met with Christ, I'm sorry, but if I hadn't met with Christ, if I hadn't met with Christ, I would not have been able to give this type of time.
누군가 제가 처음 다시 복음을 회복했을 때,
and so when I restored the gospel again, I thought 25 years from now, I wouldn't live a life like this. There will be a time where I will confess my faith. Maybe I would have tried to live a more classy 25 years. Maybe I thought of that. And I'm sorry to kind of break
지금도 우리는
in my
함께하시고
emotion. But
우리
even
삶을
now,
인도하고 계시지
God is with us
않습니까?
and guiding us.
제가 그 마지막으로 드리고 싶은
And the
얘기가
final thing I want to relay,
제가 그 아침마다
every morning
이 노화 방지,
I
영노화, 그래서 좀 칼로리를 줄이기 위한 식단을
to
하는데
lower my
그
calories.
쉐이크 같은 거를
I drink a shake, a protein shake.
단백질 쉐이크를 먹는데 이 쉐이크가
And this protein shake,
단백질이다 보니까
because it's
빨리
protein,
씻지 않으면
if you don't wash it quickly,
반나절만 지나도 막
even half a day,
단백질이 상한 냄새, 썩는 냄새.
it will begin to rot. It's smells very bad.
하루가 지나고 나면 거의
And so a day after, it's completely, really just
쏟았다 그러면 그걸 좀
completely just
냄새를 빼기도 힘들죠.
excruciating, the
그래서
stench
어느 날
that
좀
comes
그럴 수
from it.
있다가 이런 생각이
So one day I
들더라고요.
was washing the
우리 몸이
dishes.
유기체 단백질이거든요.
We are
이
like
유체가 썩고
protein.
나면
We are all
이렇게
made of
되는
protein. And so if we rot away, it becomes this way.
너무나도 불쾌하고
Completely
너무나도
just
가까이 갈 수도 없는
disgusting.
그게 유체다.
That is our
우리
physical
영혼이 있을
body.
때
When we have
하나님이
our soul
정해두신 이 시간표가 있을
in this
때
time schedule where God allows
쓰임받는
us to have life,
쓰임받을 수 있다면
to be utilized by
그게 가장
God,
큰
that is the
행복이
biggest
있구나.
happiness.
이런 마음을 요즘은
I
가지고 기도하고
have
있습니다.
that heart as I pray.
두서없는 얘기를 드렸는데요.
I've spoken in unorganized manner, but
주신 하나님께
God allowed this time schedule. I give God all the glory,
얘기지만 너그럽게 이해해 주셨으면
and may you understand
감사합니다.
my confession. Thank you.